So where is the line between like, hey, they're getting it right, which is the most important thing, but boy, umps are really taking it on the chin right now.
Jason, I actually think this does the opposite because part of the beauty of this ABS system is that when there are misses, it tells you the size of the miss, right? And when you see the majority of the misses are less than 1 inch, does that not suggest to you that these men and women who are back there squatting and trying to track in real time pitches that are going up to 105 miles per hour and that are going side to side up to 25 inches and that are going top to bottom 30 inches, like these unreal movements that happen on a baseball field and that pitchers can generate these days, and that umps are as close as they are, I look at it like, oh my God, these people have been doing incredible work for a long time now. And that this system's just here more than anything to catch the egregious ones. And that I understand, like when it's this close and you see it like that, the fans get very excited about that. But that to me, it's like umpires are awesome. And this is just a complimentary thing to the great job that they typically do already anyway.
I mean, it's a difference of that much, and it's also coming in at 100 miles an hour. So, if anything, to your point, it is a little bit more impressive for some of the umpires. But I am a long believer that if we know an umpire or a referee's name, it's probably not a good thing. And we now know the name of umpire C.B. Buckner because he had 6 pitches overturned by ABS this past weekend, including consecutive third strikes. So, big time swings in those games. The implementation of ABS, I mean, other than us publicly humiliating some of these umpires, will Major League Baseball have any other consequences for umpires that maybe have a certain number, a certain threshold of calls overturned?
Totally fair question. I think that is to be determined ultimately because we don't know at the end of the day, Caroline, how many umpires are really going to wear it on the chin with this. And we don't know what the data is going to look like. And oh, also, by the way, the umpires have a union. So getting rid of them is a really, really difficult thing to do. I mean, if we look back at the case of Angel Hernandez was a widely loathed umpire for a long, long time. And it, Angel Hernandez worked for half a decade while suing his employer, Major League Baseball, for racial discrimination. And he still remained on the field because of the power of that union. So I don't foresee there being great changes in the umpiring ranks because of this. But if nothing else, it gives us more data than we had in the past. And, more data is a better thing for assessing umpires and for understanding not just who's the worst, but also who's the best, and hopefully seeing them be the ones who are handed postseason assignments.
So I'm going to ask you. I know we got to get to real baseball, but I got one more question on this because I've long since said that we've accepted a batting average, for example. We accept an ERA in football. We accept completion percentage. I hope that we reach a point where we have transparency and we accept eventually from officials a percentage of made calls. Is baseball throughout the course of the season going to give us an ABS sort of ranking on these umps or an ABS stat line on these umps? How many times it's happened? Like, is this going to become part of our lexicon over the course of this entire process where when we find out who the umps are on games, their stat sheet is essentially made public to the world?
Is Major League Baseball going to be the one who does that? I find that highly unlikely. Is there going to be some sort of entrepreneurial soul out there who, for the greater good, brings that into our lives? I most certainly hope so. And there are already groups of people who essentially are auditors for umpires, and you know what their zone looked like after the game. You know how many pitches they missed outside of the rule book zone. And I believe in CB Buckner's game, he had 88% of strike calls correct. That's not good. We have seen games. We have seen actual perfect games from umpires before where they've gotten 100% of ball strike calls correct. So, should there be a higher standard? Absolutely. But is Major League Baseball going to be the one upon whom we depend to distribute that out there? No, that's not going to. They already have a fragile relationship with their umpires just because they do collective bargaining with them and they've gotten into the weeds with them. And I think MLB understands that if you start going after the big league umpires right now, A, you better have better replacements for them. And B, you better be ready to take on the union.
Enough robo talk. Let's talk about real human beings. Let's talk about baseball. The Dodgers are one of those teams that are still undefeated after their opening series, along with the Jays, the Brewers, the Marlins, and the Yankees. So hooray for everybody. Everyone's going 162-0. But of
Always.
those 5 teams, always, yeah, that's March. Of those 5 teams, who has really piqued your interest? Understanding that it's early, but who has piqued your interest so far?
Miami is interesting because you wouldn't expect them to be among those other teams, all of whom made the playoffs last season, most of whom won their divisions. The Marlins also played the Rockies. So, we'll see how that goes when they start playing a real big league team. Beyond that, though, I expected the Yankees to be good. I don't know if I anticipated that they were going to sweep like that, but I thought the Yankees were going to win the American League East this year. The Blue Jays and the Dodgers, they met in the World Series, and one of the great World Series of all times last year. So I suppose no surprise there. The Brewers, though, every year they do this. Every year you come into the season and you think to yourself, this team on paper isn't that good. And then last year they go out and win 97 games. And, years before they win National League Central titles. And Milwaukee they know how to win. Pat Murphy is a tremendous manager, and seeing Jacob Mizorowski on opening day absolutely carve the way he did, you start thinking, hey, maybe he's a guy who can take that leap this year. And even though they lose Andrew Vaughn for 4 to 6 weeks with a broken hand, they still fill in guys like Jake Bowers, who had 6 home runs in spring trainings, already had some already this year. They're just a great team. And I emphasize the team part of it because when you lose Vaughn and when you lose Jackson Churio on opening day, that you have the depth to come out and start out this way, a testament to who the Brewers really are.
All right, so let's look at the bad teams. Then I get to be Debbie Downer here, but there's a group of teams that so far stink in this season. But the one that's the most interesting to me is San Francisco because of the Tony Vitello experiment. It has not started well. How patient can they be with somebody that has no big league experience? We've talked a lot about it on this show. It was an interesting hire, and it's not starting well.
Let's put it this way, Jason. And I'm going to use this as a mathematics lesson here. If you have a bad week, does that mean that you're going to have a bad year? Of course not. And I say this because there are 54 3-game series essentially in a Major League Baseball season. And the Giants just lost one of them, which means they have 53 times left to try and remedy that, fix that, change that. Now, if this extends into the second one, I did something in my, I'll say my heyday when I was at Yahoo Sports, a wonderful place to work and full of engaging and charming hosts. And I wrote something called The Panic Number. And I believe there was a point at which teams, when they start 1-6 or worse, like 4 of them made the playoffs over the entire history of Major League Baseball. So we haven't reached panic number quite yet, but we're on our way. And I'll say this about the Giants. Coming into this season, the expectations, I think, throughout the industry were more that the Giants were going to be like a 500 level team, as they have been on the dot the last 2 years. And maybe they have a couple guys who played better than expected, and that bumps them up to an 84, 85 win team. And maybe they have a pitcher who has a breakout season, and that puts them up into the 87, 88 win range and into the playoffs. playoff picture. But the National League is so wide open at this point. I really have a hard time counting anyone out. And no, I do not think Tony Vitello watch is on after 3 games against a really, really good baseball team in the Yankees.
There Jeff goes, being a voice of reason when we want to be here overreacting in the month of March.
Wait, nobody
Fine,
complimented.
take
He
Can
complimented
I,
the
can
host.
I, can I just
He
say,
complimented the host while he
this,
did it.
guys? This is I will not make a summary declaration about a baseball team until like June. And even then, let's remember in June last year, the New York Mets were 45-24. They had the best record in all of Major League Baseball, and they wound up not making the playoffs. So I just caution everyone, this is a long, long season. And baseball's a stupid game where weird things happen and where bad teams will sweep good teams and where good teams will then go on a run with 12 wins in a row. And so patience is the virtue that baseball fans have the toughest time learning. And I encourage and urge anyone who after 4 days of play is panicking, it's okay. You're going to be okay. I promise.
So let's stick on not overreacting to a win-loss record or just an early and a little bit of action that we've seen just in general, looking at the league as a whole. What is one team, whether it's in what they did this past off season or what they've done with their front office, what's one team that you find fascinating this year?
I'm fascinated by the Baltimore Orioles because they go out this offseason. They sign Pete Alonso for $155 million and they trade for Tyler O'Neill and they get Chris Bassett and they trade for Shane Baz. And they're overhauling this roster that, remember, like 3 years ago, out of nowhere, came up and won 100 games. 2 years ago, we're back in the playoffs, and they got bounced both times early on. But last year, just collapsed to 75 and 87. They were in last place in the American League East, and you looked at that roster, and with Gunnar Henderson and Sam Basayo and Jordan Westberg and Jackson Holliday, and I could go Adley Rutschman, Dylan Beavers, Colton Hauser. Just the amount of young talent that they have there is really impressive, but they didn't have pitching. And so Trevor Rogers emerges in the second half last year, better ERA than anyone in the American League after May 24th, including Tarek Skubal. Kyle Bradish comes back from Tommy John surgery. Looks great. They just signed Baz to a 5-year, $68 million extension. And Bassett's in that rotation as well. And all of a sudden you look at this team and it's like, boy, they could contend, but for the American League East. And that's why that division is so intriguing to me. I think they are going to beat the crap out of each other this year. And the real question is going to be, outside of the division, who is going to emerge as the team that wins the most games, and thus I think finds itself with everybody else in the AL East having beaten up on each other. The Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, even to some extent the Rays. They're competitive year in, year out. Where do the Orioles fit in among that? And how, at the end of the day, close are they going to be, if not in the playoffs, to it?